G'day guys, back with the Outer Circle, and in today's episode I want to talk about the Imperial Fists again, but not for the reasons you think. So, in order to assess the power of the legions and rank what makes something strong in the game versus something weak is actually a little bit of a science. And I know that my personal rankings are very different to how other people rank the legions. I've consistently, and let's face it, to the frustration of many, taken shots across the bow of the Imperial Fists because I think they just have too much going on. And I'm going to break down today, segment by segment, how the logic behind my assessment is formed, and give you the tools to assess why I came to my conclusions. So to do this exercise, and you can do this for every legion, okay? We're just going to use the Imperial Fists for the example. We're going to look at segments out of the book, and I've reordered them slightly. So we'll contrast different legions against the Imperial Fists for this deeper understanding. Also, a legion can win one or multiple segments and yet still be rated lower in the end due to how different sections synergize with one another, and we'll discuss that too nearer to the end of the video. So in order today, we're going to talk about their legion traits, the Warlord Traits, advanced reactions, Wargear, legion consuls, legion elite units, Rites of War, and lastly, the named characters. I've had to rejig this order as each category logically leads into the next more smoothly this way rather than going verbatim out of the book. For example, talking about a Rite of War and how it's strong for including a certain unit, when you haven't even spoken about the unit, means you really lack context to understand what I'm talking about. So that's why I've flipped a few things around. To begin with, we're going to look at legion traits. So, when it comes to comparisons and looking at legion traits, a legion trait effectiveness is directly proportional to two things: versatility and repeatability. What do I mean by this? Well, a legion which has a trait which is applied to multiple units, or which applies multiple benefits, is always far more useful than a single rigid ability. The Dark Angel's Hexagamaton offers a wide variety of slightly weaker versions of what the other Legion's traits are, meaning a force is more easily tailored into a certain niche with the Dark Angels because of this, ironically undone by their Rites of War. When it comes to repeatability, a trait which can be used more than one time or in more than a niche scenario is far more valuable than a trait which is limited to uses in singular cases. For example, a legion like the Raven Guard, their trait applies either once per game in the form of Infiltrate, or not at all to some units, and especially the key units you are asked to take. For the World Eaters, their legion trait, it only applies when they make a charge and the charge is not disordered. See, the more restrictive the criteria, the worse a trait is a pretty good rule of thumb. Now, looking at the Imperial Fists, our video's subject for today, their legion trait applies a +1 to hit modifier to all bolt and auto weapons, which is over 34 different weapons, most of which are the most commonly found weapons in the game, such as bolt guns, auto cannons, assault cannons, heavy bolters, etc. This also applies to vehicles, which also start out stock in many cases with these same types of weapons. Sicarans, Predators, Sicaran Punishers, all of them are able to hit units on +1 with all of their stock weapons. For other legions to gain that kind of a buff, they would need to include a character with something like a Cognis Signum. This buff is not only common, but further boosts attacks such as snap shooting, as again, the most common weapons in the game are bolt and auto weapons, and the ability to hit on 5s when snap shooting is a big multiplier over hitting only on 6s. Furthermore, the Imperial Fists are able to use their ability whenever they shoot. There is no criteria such as cannot have moved tied to it, which is a common restriction that we see. Even similar traits, such as that held by the Dark Angels, only touches upon the power of this by affecting bolt guns, bolt pistols, and heavy bolters, which far limits the scope of the ability. As an example of that, if I was to fire 24 sniper rifles at you from any other legion, they would on average land 16 hits. In the Imperial Fists, they would land 20 They did nothing to earn this level of power, they just possess it by default. And whilst by far not the strongest trait in the game, it is a very solid trait therefore, and I think should be treated as such. Warlord Traits. Warlord Traits, like Legion traits, are stronger based upon their versatility and their repeatability, but with the additional caveat of viability. You see, if a Warlord trait makes a joined unit stronger, there needs to be an understanding that a character being taken away from the action to be in said unit is a major limitation. Since a Praetor is generally the strongest close combat unit in the infantry lineup outside of Primarchs and Custodes, forcing a Praetor to babysit a unit in the back line in order to gain from his ability, it kind of wastes the talents of that particular model. Therefore, a trait that does this would rate much lower on the scale. With that in mind, the Imperial Fist traits are as follows. The Solar Marshal, which is a loyalist-only trait, grants the Warlord and anyone in his unit, so not the unit he joins, but anyone in the unit, an additional point of weapon skill versus traitors. In addition, you gain an additional reaction in any phase of your choice. Now, it goes without saying, the ability to have Weapon Skill 6 Terminator Bodyguards, Weapon Skill 6 Consuls and other characters in the squad, and a Weapon Skill 7 Praetor is incredibly strong this edition, and it would give a decisive edge in most combats the Warlord and his unit find themselves in. This is always turned on, making it repeatable, and the ability have a reaction in any phase when most traits restrict you to a particular phase is also hugely versatile, making this one of the best traits in the game, hands down. Warden of Inwit. It grants the Warlord and his unit within 6 inches of an objective or inside their deployment zone immunity to morale and pinning checks. You also gain an additional reaction in the assault phase. And whilst not the strongest ability, morale is an issue in 2.0, and this is reliable insurance. Legions like the Salamanders, however, have a trait which grants the entire army +1 leadership and -1 to enemy fear abilities, which in my mind is actually a far stronger ability than this, and works army-wide, which makes it superior to the Imperial Fists. Architect of Devastation is their third ability, and it allows you to reroll 1s to hit with all of your attacks in the Warlord's unit. This is even in close combat, but you must be within area terrain, which grants a cover save or a fortification for this to apply. It also offers an additional reaction in the assault phase. It goes without saying that if you're firing bolt or auto weapons, this would mean that you may reroll every to hit roll you fail because you'll be hitting on 2s with everything. This isn't that strong for shooting, however. It's actually strongest in close combat, as that's where the character will most likely want to be, and can give an edge in bodyguard fights with the small reroll bonus. However, I think the clear standout here is the Solar Marshal. For the Legion's advanced reaction now. An advanced reaction is strongest when it allows you to either cause more damage than you would take, or can greatly mitigate the damage you would take. An example of this might be the Raven Guard moving out of range of your action, which is very useful, but doesn't directly cause damage to the enemy. The Imperial Fist trait, on the other hand, allows the Imperial Fist unit to charge an enemy unit who moves within 10 inches of them. Now, typically when moving into assault range in 2.0, you try and stop reactions from occurring. The way you would do this is by either shooting or through the use of psychic powers, shooting to cause pinning or psychic abilities to shut down reactions. Now, as this reaction occurs during movement, you must have shut down the unit in the preceding turn if you want to stop this reaction from taking place. This is actually impossible in some situations, such as deep striking in the first turn of the game. Stray too close to the Imperial Fists and you're going to be charged before you can act, as they react. How confusing. Anyway, it's quite a strong ability, and again, not the best technically in the game. The Ultramarines, for example, can return fire with multiple units, and the Iron Warriors can dramatically rapid fire at you if you set off their reaction on the wrong unit. 3 crack missiles per tyrant, did you say? Wargear. Wargear is ranked on 4 levels. Does it increase your defense? Does it have an equivalent type? Is it widely available? And does it perform in the role intended? So, if an item has an equivalent type, because I'll get this out of the way at the start, that would mean there is something with identical stats to it elsewhere in the game, and if it's already available to them, then taking this Wargear is functionally pointless. That's what we mean when we say has an equivalent unit type. So the first item of Wargear is the Storm Shield. Whilst not cheap, it's also not too expensive. The Ultramarines have a boosted boarding shield, the Salamanders have their own weaker Storm Shield, but the Imperial Fists are the clear standout, as their shield just grants a flat 3+ invulnerable save, without any other Wargear required. Salamander shields, they only boost an existing save by +1. You put a Salamander Storm Shield on Tartarus Terminators, they get a 4+ invulnerable save. You put an Imperial Fist Storm Shield on Tartarus Terminators, they get a 3+ invulnerable save. Big difference. And the Ultramarine shields, they don't even perform as well as that, because they are a slightly boosted boarding shield. This is also widely available to all Terminators, making it one of the best items of Wargear in the game because it is widely available. The second item is the Teleport Strike. For some reason, the Imperial Fists above legions like the Raven Guard or White Scars have access to teleporting Terminators without the requirement to take a Consul such as a Warmonger or a separate Rite of War. This is unique and unique to their legion alone. The Night Lords lost this ability from 1.0, making it a unique and very useful ability for the Imperial Fists, but crucially, not game-breaking. The third item on the list is the Solarite Gauntlet. This item of Wargear is a replacement for your Power Fist, costing just 5 points more. Many legions have items of Wargear like this, items that replace a weapon such as a Power Sword, with a very slightly improved Power Sword. For example, the Calibanite Warblade. The weapon that is competing in this slot is competing with weapons like the Thunderhammer. The Thunderhammer, of course, is brutal too. Normally, a weapon in that category loses out to the hammer, but we will see something strange occurring here because the Solarite Gauntlet, in my print version, and side note, I am aware it varies from country to country, so don't let me know that yours doesn't match in the comments. Blame Games Workshop's quality control. But in my print, it's AP1. Makes it useful destroying vehicles, but also, more importantly, it's a flat strength of 10. This puts the Imperial Fists into a unique position where all of their attacks can instantly kill Toughness 5 units and battle-hardened Toughness 4 units. Further, as it is not a specialist weapon, it actually gives +1 attack when paired with another close combat weapon or a pistol, for just 5 points more than a regular Power Fist, when other +1 attack Wargear costs 10 points in addition to the Wargear. This is a clear steal. On Indomitus Terminators who come with Power Fists, you can have a 200 point squad of 5 Terminators with Strength 10 close combat attacks. Very powerful stuff. The Thousand Suns Force weapons, for example, which are competing in this same category, don't even reach this level of power. You have to test if they even boost in strength, and then they will only boost up to, I think, strength 6, maybe strength 7 is the strongest of the Thousand Suns Achaean Force weapons, and even then, their Achaean Force weapons generally are not AP 1 or 2. Another example of weapons in this category is the Iron Warriors Graviton Mauls, which gain Haywire but lack the brutality and strength of other weapons in the category. So, most other weapons here, they don't compete. The other type of weapon you might see trying to compete are Murderous Strike weapons, but they're similar points costs in many cases, and unfortunately, they rely on you rolling things like 6s to wound, whereas a Solarite Power Gauntlet against most units will be rolling 2s to wound and causing instant death. Against any unit which is able to be instantly killed by Strength 10, these things are terrifying. Galvorback, Death Shroud, Morlocks, Custodes, Demon Brutes, these are the very toughest infantry in the game, and yet this weapon can instantly delete them. The fourth and final item of Wargear is a weapon they share with the Blood Angels, the Iliastus pattern Assault Cannon. Whilst both legions can make strong use of it, the Blood Angels have better mobility. But the Imperial Fist trait grants them far more accurate shooting. If you build an armoured spearhead for the Imperial Fists, you can take a Sicaran battle tank and 10 Predators, all armed with assault cannon, sponsons, and pintle weapons, which will give you, between those and the autocannons, almost 200 shots per shooting phase, hitting on 2s with a strength of 6 or greater and rending. Whilst not the most powerful Wargear, and even though vehicles can be killed relatively easy in 2.0, firepower like this can table a weaker army like Solar Auxilia in a single turn of shooting, and even cripple a Marine force once they've exhausted their reactions. A 10-man Legion Heavy Support Squad, which is potentially scoring, by the way, we'll get to that later, can take 10 of these for a total of 350 points. A 10-man Heavy Support Squad with assault cannons, and they can sit there holding your deployment zone on their own. Nobody wants to bring units, even Terminators, into range of that much rending firepower, which can also move and fire at full ballistic skill. Even their Dreadnoughts can take 2 Gravis Power Fists for an additional close combat attack, and yet still have 2 Assault Cannons for additional firepower in their hands for backup firepower for just 20 points. Legion Consuls. Legion unique Consuls are rare, with only a few strange choices of Legion gaining access to them. In fact, it's the Dark Angels, the Emperor's Children, the White Scars, the Sons of Horus, the Space Wolves, the Imperial Fists, the Word Bearers, and the Elf Legion. So 8 legions, not even half, have a custom Consul. What do you get here? Well, unique Legion Consuls, to be considered truly great, have to provide a bonus which no other Legion has, which no other unit has. A bonus which is unique and yet widely usable, or a great multiplier of force. An example of this is the Space Wolves Speaker of the Dead, who has the powers of both a Primus Medicae and a Chaplain. It's 45 points for that. The Consul is now the equal of 2 other pretty solid Consul choices, and therefore it's very strong. Conversely, the Phoenix Warden of the Emperor's Children is merely a much more restrictive side grade to the Legion Champion, which every Legion already has, and it kind of negates the usefulness of that unit. Now, the Imperial Fist unique Consul is the Castellan, who is a very, very cheap choice. At just 20 points, he's the second cheapest Consul in the game, tied with a couple, with the Fen being the only Consul I've spotted who is cheaper. Now, the Castellan can take a heavy weapon, which is normally restricted from characters such as a heavy bolter, an autocannon, or an Iliastus assault cannon, and he may fire an additional shot with any heavy weapon, which ironically makes the best choice actually the Nemesis bolt gun, giving him more shots than the Legion Vigilator, a specific sniper Consul. This on its own isn't what makes the Consul strong, however. It's actually the ability to make all Legion heavy support squads line. Line, for those who are unaware, is what grants units the ability to score in Heresy 2.0. Not even all troops choices in the game have line, so granting it to all units of a certain type without paying additional points or putting any limitation on it is quite good. Objective play is not as important in 2.0 as in the original Heresy system, but it is still allowing you to not only move a useful character into your force, but it allows you to move your characters and squads out of your deployment zone and not have to babysit objectives with troops choices, because you can instead put your heavy support choices who don't want to leave your deployment zone onto an objective to hold it. Highly, highly underrated ability. When we did a tier ranking video on all of the Legion Consuls on live stream just the other weekend, we had 6 contributors in there. And it was actually worth pointing out, we unanimously agreed that this was the strongest Consul in the game, for what it's worth. Legion Elite units now. The Legion has 3 units available to them, which is less than some legions and more than others. However, elite units are not directly proportional to Legion strength. The Thousand Suns are an example of having 6 units, and yet they still fail to impress. They're not very good units. The Imperial Fists have 3 different units. The Templar Brethren, which is an elite infantry unit designed to fight other Marines. Not as powerful as something like Palatine Blades, but a little bit more survivable because they've got things like combat shields. The Phalanx Warders, they're a rock-solid elite breacher unit. They come with power weapons, they have good survivability, they're designed to take being charged on the chin and to return the pain. Their only competitor in this category is really the Invictus Suzerain. Their big strength is gaining weapon skill 5 when you charge them, and their big detriment is only a single base attack. But when they're in close coherency, they improve their shield save and invulnerable save by +1. The last unit in here is actually a 0 to 1 choice, which is a big limitation, and that is the Legion Huskarls, weapon skill 5 elite Terminators with stubborn, built-in deep strike, built-in storm shields, and the ability to take Solarite Gauntlets, which I highly recommend doing. They can be taken as a retinue, which is very good because then you don't use a elite slot for them, and on the turn you charge them, they become battle hardened. That means if you charge Huskarls with other elite Terminators, your Thunderhammers and Power Fists cannot instantly kill them. Thanks to their Strength 10 Counterpunch, however, you will be instantly killed, and not even Justirian, who negate your strength by -1 if you charge them, can actually stop instant death from these guys. Very, very strong ability. Rites of War now. When it comes to Rites of War, like with elite units, quantity doesn't equate to strength. The Dark Angels have 6 Rites of War, most of which are pretty mediocre, with 1 or 2 potential standout builds. The Ultramarines, they have just a single Rite of War, and I don't rate that myself. The Raven Guard cannot even use one of their Rites of War, because at the time of recording it requires Militia, and Militia don't have rules in the game. The Imperial Fists have 3, and out of the 3, the 2 that we're really going to look at here are rites that convert elite units into not just troops, but into line troops. That means scoring. There are only 2 other Rites of War that are unique to legions that I can think of which make a unit troops and line, and I could be mistaken as there are over 30 odd legion specific rites, so forgive me if I've missed one, I do apologise. The 2 rites I'm thinking of are Black Reaving and Covenant of Fire. But here the Imperial Fists have not 1, but 2 Rites of War that do the same thing, and it's for the 1 legion. That's versatility. But do the units they actually make into troops actually benefit from this? After all, bad units are still bad even if they score. Well, in short, Templar Brethren as scoring troops who gain Heart of the Legion for +1 on their Feel No Pain, and Rage 2 for the duration of the game turn in which they disembark from a transport, is not a bad trade-off for being only able to take as many elites or fast attack options as you have troops. In the other Rite of War, the Stone Gauntlet, it's a repeat of this, but it grants the already rock-hard Phalanx Warders the Heart of the Legion and re-rolling failed invulnerable saves. That's not a bad trade-off for taking a few less jet bikes. I think that the ability to improve Feel No Pain and re-rolling your boosted invulnerable saves on your elite, now troops choices, which are also scoring and gain weapon skill 5 on the charge, is on them being charged, I should say, is very, very strong. Characters. The Imperial Fists have 3 named characters. That's less than the Dark Angels, Night Lords, or Wordbearers, but they are all solid to game beating in scope. So, first up we have Pollux, the first Crimson Fist. You get a Storm Shielded Praetor whose gimmick is that he acts like a warmonger, allows the unit he joins in reserves to deep strike onto the battlefield, and he can make a single Solarite Gauntlet attack at initiative instead of his normal attacks. Yeah, he's fun, and he's probably the least gimmicky of the characters. Second character is Fafnir Ran, who is the first Executioner. His gimmick is his two fighting modes, based on offense or defense. He also boosts boarding shield troops in his army by granting them all +1 weapon skill when they charge, meaning that Phalanx Warders are also weapon skill 5 when charging now, not just when they are charged. A solid Praetor for his points, with a lot of AP2 at initiative attacks. The last character is Sigismund, the first Black Templar. He makes Templar Brethren into troops, which is odd since you're probably taking the Rite of War Templar Assault anyway. You don't take Sigismund for his ability to buff an army, which is very minimal and very situational. You take Sigismund because for some reason he's the only Eternal Warrior Marine character in the game. There are plenty of other characters who live through the Horus Heresy. In fact, both of the other Imperial Fist characters do, but he is literally the benchmark against which every other close combat character is measured against in the game. And whilst others can come close to killing him, such as Causewayne, he cannot be instant death because of Eternal Warrior. They can, and all of his attacks force you to reroll successful saves, and they inflict instant death. Sigismund is death personified. Sigismund is the strongest Space Marine character, bar none, in the game. And the battle is actually for second place. That battle is between Causewayne, Sevatar, and Lucius. Sigismund can even beat some Primarchs in hand-to-hand. That's how strong he is. So now let's tie all of this information together. I've pointed out how the fists work in each category, excluding their Primarch, because all Primarchs are in their own tier and they all operate in a similar way. But what's interesting is how they don't always win in a particular category. Do the Imperial Fists have the best characters? Maybe as a duelist, Sigismund, sure. But against anything less than Sigismund, Dark Angels, Night Lords, World Eaters, Emperor's Children, they all have characters within striking distance. In Warlord Traits, there are equally good traits out there, such as those held by the Salamanders. For Legion traits, some legions have more versatility, tailoring themselves somewhat for their unique situations, such as the Dark Angels. In elite units, the Huskarls do dominate, but they only have one unit, and without their Rite of War, the Phalanx Warders and Templar Brethren are far weaker for their points. The Wargear of the Space Wolves are one of the best units in the game, as are Iron Warriors, Siege Tyrants, and their non-Union Ultramarines knockoff equivalents. So why do I still, after that, think that the Imperial Fists are the strongest Legion? Well, you have a Legion trait which is always on. You just have a very, very common weapon and you get a 16% accuracy boost. Their Warlord can boost their Bodyguard up to weapon skill 6. Meaning that the most elite Terminators of other legions cannot easily strike you. They hit you on 5s, you hit them on 3s. Their unique reaction can allow them to charge you with no recourse if you're silly enough to get too close, in your own turn. Their Wargear offers the best defensive bonus and the only weapons which can reliably kill all Toughness 5 and Battle Hardened 1, Toughness 4 units in the game. Their Legion Consul makes Legion heavy support not troops, but at least makes them line, which is scoring, while still performing their own useful, unique role. And they even keep the bonus if the Legion Consul dies. They are one of the only legions which makes their elite units not to just troops, which is common, but into line, which is incredibly rare, and on top of that, it boosts the survivability of their units as well as moving them in the Force Org chart. All of this is backed by having 2 solid special characters and the most powerful Marine in the game. Picture this for an army. Fafnir Ran leading an army of Phalanx Warders using the Stone Gauntlet, supported by twin Gravis Fist Dreadnoughts with assault cannons in their palms, backed by Legion heavy support squads with line. The Phalanx Warders will have a 4+ rerollable invulnerable save, a 4+ feel no pain damage mitigation, weapon skill 5 when they charge, weapon skill 5 when they are charged. This is what makes a strong Legion, when all of the right things come together at the right time in the right sequence. There are certain stats which are worth more to be boosted. Weapon skill, ballistic skill, wounds, toughness, attacks, These are stats you want to see boosted. And these guys have it. They have boosted weapon skill. 5 is very common in the Legion. They have boosted shooting. +1 to hit on all bolt and auto weapons. They have boosted survivability, thanks to Heart of the Legion and Storm Shields. They have additional boosts to their firepower, with a lot of rending firepower, which is boosted by their Legion trait. This is what makes a Legion strong. It's not dominating any one category and being objectively the best in one area. What makes a Legion strong is being so high up in every category that when you roll it all in together and it synergizes well, that's what makes you the best. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. Hopefully this didn't come across as a salty episode. I think I kept it pretty fair and balanced the way throughout. But please, give me your thoughts and feedback in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it, and I'll see you all on the next episode.